Notice of motion private business number 5, the Honourable T.A. Franks to move.
Ms Franks.
Thank you, Mr President. I move notice of motion private business number 5 standing in my name, namely that I have leave to introduce a bill for an Act to amend the Animal Welfare Act 1985 and the Dog and Cat Management Act 1995.
Is that seconded? Seconded. Put the question. Those for the question say aye. Against say no. The ayes have it. Bring it up.
A bill for an Act to amend the Animal Welfare Act 1985 and the Dog and Cat Management Act 1995.
Thank you, Mr President. I move that the bill now be read a second time, and I rise today to introduce this bill, which I first introduced last year before Parliament was prorogued. As I do so, I would like to once again emphasise that while it is being brought forward before this place as a Greens bill, I wouldn't necessarily call it a Greens bill. It is the product of many years of work, advocacy and campaigning by many people and organisations throughout South Australia and indeed well beyond. I would in particular like to thank MIA, the PAW Project and the RSPCA for their input into this bill, as well as the Animal Welfare League for the conversations we've been able to have with them on this important area of animal welfare reform. This bill responds to the overwhelming public demand for the humane and accountable treatment of animals and reverses the sanctioned cruelty of woefully inadequate minimum animal welfare standards. It also seeks to improve transparency and accountability. South Australia has some of the weakest animal welfare laws in the country, and that this is simply unacceptable and we need to address it. That is why today I introduce this bill that amends the Animal Welfare Act and the Dog and Cat Management Act and also the Criminal Law Consolidation Act. This bill covers a range of important animal welfare law reforms. Because our laws are out of date and they're out of step with community expectations. The task, of course, of updating them is a significant one, but by delaying, we also delay and prolong suffering and cruelty. This bill is modelled on the principles of what is known as the Companion Animal Protection Acts in America, or what we've come to term here in South Australia as smart sheltering. It is also informed by the work and experience of the RSPCA when it comes to their enforcement of our local state Animal Welfare Act. Much has been done, and I do acknowledge the work of the previous government, and in particular Minister Hunter, who was in this place as in his time as minister, but much more is still to be done. Credit where credit's due, former Minister. This bill, of course, tackles a raft of issues that are still pressing in this area. It seeks to reduce the number of dogs and cats that are needlessly euthanased by rescues and shelters to as close to zero as possible. It creates a code of practice and licensing requirements for animal shelters, for rehousing services and for animal rescues. It enables better proactive action to be taken to prevent animal cruelty, and it creates special provisions relating to the greyhound racing industry, outlining reporting requirements for them and also, importantly, making them subject to freedom of information requests. I think it's an excellent reflection on South Australians that our community has demonstrated time and time again in recent years their strong support for animal welfare, and as well as organisations that assist and aid those animals. But time and time again we've also seen that our laws just aren't as strong or consistent enough to ensure that we can assure the safety of those animals who are in our care, those companion animals, and that we can effectively prevent, preferably, or punish animal cruelty where and as it occurs. In comparison to other states, our Animal Welfare Act is quite weak in the protection as it fails those animals in South Australia, I believe. In fact, in many ways, saying that it offers protection to animals is almost a misnomer. It offers the possibility of prosecution against perpetrators of animal cruelty, but they themselves rarely face serious penalties and certainly not commensurate with their actions. Our laws do need to focus much more not on just prosecution, but on preventing cruelty, rather than waiting for the harm to actually happen. Even in the cases of the most brutal act of animal cruelty in this state, we know that the RSPCA has never managed to secure the maximum penalty available under the Act, that of a 4-year jail term or a $50,000 fine. And yet there has been some extraordinary levels of animal cruelty in this state, and this simply isn't good enough. With that in mind, this bill does adopt the RSPCA's recommendations for animal welfare law reform, and I understand that they wrote to the Minister early in this new term of the Marshall government. These amendments are in this bill and include, but are not limited to, providing RSPCA inspectors with the ability to enter property and vehicles to seize evidence, establishing animal cruelty intervention orders and interim court orders to prevent animal cruelty. Similar to other states, this allows for proactive orders to be made so that a court can intervene before that animal cruelty worsens or arises. It also allows a court to make prohibition orders during the course of a prosecution as a proactive means of cruelty prevention. It also provides for penalties for breaches of interstate prohibition orders. We are in a federation, and that is only as it should be. I'm glad to note, however, and I do thank the Honourable Frank Pangello for his work in this, that one of the changes between the previous bill I introduced and this particular bill is, given he moved a successful amendment to the Criminal Law Consolidation Act 1935, which now protects RSPCA inspectors by adding them to the list of occupations under section 5AA1C, assault on those inspectors is now an aggravated offence. But it is also vital that we update our laws in South Australia so that animal rescues and rehousing services, rehoming services provide consistent quality care and that they are accountable and transparent in their practices. While I know that the RSPCA publicly publishes its statistics on the animals it receives, and that includes the number that are reclaimed, the number that are rehomed, those that are currently in the RSPCA's care and those that are transferred, as well as the number euthanased at both a state and a national level, other organisations entrusted with these practices do not do this. That lack of transparency and accountability is not only disappointing, it is of course counterproductive. It is disappointing because without this information there's no way to tell if an organisation is actually doing a good job or not. Though of course I recognise as well that raw statistics are never the whole story and that most organisations are doing indeed very good jobs. There are of course many reasons why animals do have to be put down. Incurable medical conditions where the animal is suffering unendurably, of course the most obvious one. Unresolvable behavioural issues such as aggression or biting are others. But we should be doing everything we can to keep the number of euthanased animals to a minimum, and that is why this legislation that I introduced today is based on that philosophy of smart sheltering. In some places, and most notably the United States of America, this has been called no kill. In Queensland, it's called getting to zero. Around the world, this has increasingly been something that communities are demanding of those who have care of our companion animals. However, redemption is key. While all shelters will have to sometimes put down irremediably ill and suffering animals, smart sheltering aims to provide a more holistic approach to the welfare of those animals that is charged with the care of. Ultimately, smart sheltering comes down to the principle of not killing healthy or treatable animals. And that is the approach that this legislation takes as well. Shelters shouldn't be killing healthy animals because their holding period is over or because the shelter is full. Instead, under this legislation, they must take all reasonable steps to reunite the animal, to rehouse the animal, and it can indeed include offering it to other rescue services. And we know that this is achievable, Mr President, because we don't have to look much further than our sister city of Austin, Texas, to see that it is so. The incredible impact of such legislation over there has been that Austin, Texas is a no-kill city. In 2011, they moved that way, and they are now able to save more than 90% of their homeless or surrendered animals in any year. Coming from this philosophy, this bill introduces new objects and principles into the Animal Welfare Act, and it is these principles that I'd like to focus on. No dog or cat should be killed if it can be safely placed in a suitable home. Dogs and cats in rehousing facilities require proper shelter, care, nutrition and exercise. Dogs and cats in rehousing facilities require enrichment and interaction. Dogs and cats in rehousing facilities require proper veterinary care. Prescribed organisations should make every effort and be supported to provide every dog and cat in their custody with individual consideration care. The Greens wish to make sure that our companion animals in this state are treated humanely and with respect to their individual needs. We also seek to make sure that they're not killed needlessly or arbitrarily, but they are also not held in an environment or in conditions that prolong their suffering. In those situations where an animal is suffering, of course. It is difficult to strike this balance, but it is achievable, and that can be helped to be achieved with this bill. This bill outlines how dogs and cats cannot be euthanased simply because a holding period has expired or because the rehousing service they've ended up at doesn't have space to take them. Such services are required to provide adequate care, as well as to take all reasonable steps to provide the opportunity for adoption, for fostering, or to go to another rescue or shelter. Where an animal is irremediably suffering, there are strict conditions on how and why that animal can be killed, and services are required to record and report on the number of animals that they euthanase. To this extent, this bill also establishes the requirement for a code of practice to be created that provides for the quality of care for those cats and dogs in these prescribed organisations. Prescribed organisations under this bill are those that provide rescue and rehousing services. They will also now be required to have a licence to provide any of those services, with the intention being that this will ensure that these services are accountable and transparent in how they operate, and that they will adhere to the minimum standards of care. Such organisations will also be required to report annually. The facts and figures of what they will be required to report include the total number of dogs and cats surrendered or otherwise rescued by the licence holder, the total number of dogs and cats returned to their owners by the licence holder, the number of dogs and cats rehoused by that licence holder, the number of dogs or cats euthanased by or on behalf of the licence holder, including the reason for the administration of that, and the number of dogs or cats in the care of the licence holder on the 31st of July of that year. Any other information also required by the regulations may indeed be added under the Code of Practice. This bill is heavily focused on ensuring transparency. Unless we count these animals, we can't say that they really count. And unlike our current animal welfare laws, it does not forget greyhounds. Greyhounds are dogs. Currently, our laws do not treat them as such. I've spoken many times previously in this parliament about the need to keep Greyhound Racing SA to its word that they continue to publish figures as they promised, when forced indeed by this council with the threat of a select committee into their practices. The legislation I put forward today extends transparency and accountability to the greyhound racing industry. To that end, what it requires of the greyhound industry is quite basic: that they lodge every year a report with the Minister detailing the number of registered greyhounds destroyed, the approximate number of unregistered greyhounds destroyed and the methods used, and that these reports will be tabled in Parliament. It also importantly clarifies that Greyhound Racing SA are subject to the FOI Act. Mr President, I could go on at length about the number of FOI requests that I've put into this industry where they've refused to comply, saying that they aren't subject to the Act, and the conflicting legal advice at 20 paces that then ensues. This bill will clarify that they are indeed subject to the FOI Act. That transparency measure will ensure that we have the truth about what is going on with this industry and that healthy dogs are living long and healthy, enriched lives. Ultimately, this bill is intended to be yet another step in the right direction towards modernising our animal welfare laws here in South Australia. They do lag behind those of other states in this country, and as a state, we really do need to focus on not just the prosecution of cruelty and strengthening that, but of course the prevention of animal cruelty so that it is in line with public expectations and of course because it is the right thing to do. Our animal welfare laws need to be able to be enforced properly and they should be serving the very animals that they are supposed to protect. With that, I commend the bill to the Council.